outbreak of coronavirus meant that they had taken this decision. There's also been talk of some countries like Slovenia not wanting Italian delivery lorries to go through the country, to go to other countries in case the drivers stop and maybe they could come into contact with other people and then pass on the virus that way. So there have been issues with our neighbouring countries.
Danny Mitzman in Bologna. Now let's turn to the source of coronavirus, Wuhan, China. These are the original balcony chanters, people who have been living in quarantine for more than 40 days, shouting support at each other. Among them is a teacher from Wales who's been quarantined in his apartment for a month and a half. And he spoke to me on Skype.
My name's Connor Reid, and I'm one of the first Brits to catch the coronavirus here in Wuhan. The quarantine measures came into place at 3 a.m. In the morning. I was lucky enough to be awake and to see the text message. I left my house straight away and went to my 24-hour supermarket, and I stocked up on supplies. And luckily I did, because the first week of the quarantine, it was very difficult to get supplies because everybody was buying it out. It was a week after that the quarantine was put into place. That's where the government started to organise a logistics of food and how we feed ourselves.
And all of this was being conveyed in text messages?
It was, yes. Every Chinese phone is linked to the government, so any updates over the course of this quarantine, anything that happens, we all get a message on our phones, positive messages. And if we need to speak to a psychologist, we have specific numbers to call. The support is very, very good.
Let's end at the beginning, the very origins of the virus itself, because it's also a food story. Evidence so far points to a market in Wuhan in which wild animals were brought together and slaughtered, and through them, a virus carried by bats was transferred along the food chain and into humans. This is why coronavirus is described as a zoonotic disease. One of the world's leading experts on how these diseases spread from animals and into humans is Professor Andrew Cunningham of the Zoological Society of London.
Measles was thought to have originally been a zoonosis that came from domesticated livestock at the time that they were domesticated, jumped into human beings, and then gradually evolved to become a human-only disease. HIV is another one that's known to have originated in wildlife and is now recognised as a human disease. But there are many species of particularly wild animal that we haven't had historically close interactions with, that we are now increasingly having close interactions with, and therefore we are exposed as a human race to pathogens that we haven't necessarily been exposed to in our evolutionary history. And the way that human society has developed, so population has increased massively, we're much more connected, and particularly with airplanes. And so if somebody got sick with a zoonosis maybe 100 years ago, it would have died out because they would have either got better or would have died before infecting other people. Now somebody can be in the Central African rainforests one day and in central London the next.
A newly affluent China in a globalized world has fueled demand for more wild animals, a new source of exotic meat, and not one that's part of traditional Chinese food culture. A trend Professor Cunningham has been monitoring.
These massive live animal markets didn't really exist before or during the Cultural Revolution. It's a 1980s onwards phenomenon, and particularly the last